Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack the defining details of a disaster that, quite literally, reshaped our modern world. Picture this. It's April 26, 1986. An explosion completely shatters the stillness of the night near the city of Pripyat, sending this terrifying, glowing beam of ionized air shooting straight up into the night sky. It unleashed an invisible terror, leaving a distinct, sort of metallic taste in the air that nearby residents woke up to the next morning. This is the story of the Chernobyl disaster. And we aren't just going to look at what happened on that one tragic night. We're going to really look closely at the underlying science, the staggering human mobilization that had to follow, and the honestly surprising ways this environment continues to evolve decades later. $700 billion. Let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering financial cost when you factor in the immediate emergency response, the decades of environmental containment, the forced relocation of hundreds of thousands of people, and the ongoing health and economic impacts across multiple countries. Chernobyl remains the absolutely most expensive disaster in human history. It's a monumental event with consequences so vast they're almost difficult to even comprehend. So here is our roadmap for today. 1. The reactor 4 explosion. 2. The anatomy of a meltdown. 3. The human toll. 4. Nature's radioactive rebound. And finally, 5. Containing the zone today. We're going to walk through this step by step. Section 1. The reactor 4 explosion. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this disaster actually began under the guise of a totally routine safety test. The sequence of events here on April 25th and 26th reads like a slow-motion tragedy. At 01:06 hours, so just after 1 a.m., operators began a planned power reduction. But then, fast forward to 00:28 the next day, and control was completely lost. Thermal power crashed unexpectedly to just 30 megawatts. This near-total shutdown created an incredibly unstable and what they call poisoned reactor state. So in a desperate attempt to salvage the test, the operators pulled almost all the control rods out to manually force the power back up. By 01:22, the reactor's operational reactivity margin had dropped to intensely dangerous levels. Finally, at 01:23, realizing the reactor was totally out of control, an operator hit the AZ5 button. That's the emergency shutdown. But instead of shutting down, the sudden power surge caused the cooling water to instantly flash to steam. This created pressure so immense, it literally blew the 1,000-ton biological shield, the reactor lid they nicknamed Alina, right off the top of the reactor, triggering devastating steam and nuclear explosions that completely destroyed Unit 4. 2. Anatomy of a meltdown. Now, you might be wondering, why in the world would pressing an emergency stop button actually cause an explosion? To understand that, we have to look past the human operators and dive into the underlying science of the Soviet RBMK 1000 reactor. The heart of the problem lies in this concept, the positive void coefficient. Now, in this specific reactor design, liquid water acted as both a coolant and a neutron absorber. Think of the water like a brake pedal on the nuclear reaction. When the reactor began to overheat, the water boiled into steam, creating empty pockets or voids. Because steam doesn't absorb neutrons the way liquid water does, well, that brake pedal was suddenly removed. The hotter the reactor got, the more steam was created, which in turn caused the power to spike even higher in this rapid, totally uncontrollable feedback loop. So the crucial point is that this disaster was the result of a fatal intersection between human error and severe design flaws. Yes, the operators absolutely bypassed vital safety systems to run their test, but the reactor itself had foundational issues. Most notably, the control rods, the very things designed to stop a reaction, they actually had graphite tips. As these rods descended into the core, those graphite tips momentarily displaced the cooling water. Because graphite accelerates a nuclear reaction while water slows it down, this caused a massive, localized power spike before the rods could even do their job. And to make matters worse, similar design flaws had actually been noticed back in 1983 at the Ignalina plant, but those warnings were ignored and never communicated to the Chernobyl operators. Look at this right here. Official post-accident commission reports ultimately realized the truth. Investigators placed the blame not entirely on the operational staff, but on the reactor's foundational physics. They explicitly acknowledged that the reactor was brought to a state that led to the manifestation of that positive void coefficient, alongside the severe deficiencies in the design of the control rods. It was, quite literally, a mechanical time bomb, just waiting for the wrong sequence of events. 3. The human toll. with the mechanical and physical failures understood, we really must transition to the immediate aftermath. The explosion ripped the roof off the reactor, exposing a glowing, burning core to the open air and unleashing a massive radioactive cloud. 500,000. Fighting this unprecedented, invisible fire required an absolute army. Over 500,000 personnel, known as liquidators, were deployed to the site in the months and years following the explosion. We're talking firefighters, soldiers, miners, and engineers working in unimaginably hazardous conditions. To clear the highly radioactive debris off the adjacent roof, human biorobots were used. Why? Because the immense radiation quickly fried the electronics of actual remote-controlled machines. Men wearing crude lead vests had to run out onto the roof with shovels for only 90 seconds at a time. Any longer, and they would receive a lethal lifetime dose of radiation in mere minutes. Their sacrifice was immense, and the cost to their long-term health was an incredibly heavy burden borne for the safety of all of Europe. The liquidators, and honestly the wider public, were facing an invisible enemy made up of 4 primary, highly dangerous radionuclides. Let's break this down. You have iodine-131, cesium-134, strontium-90, and cesium-137. Now, iodine-131 caused massive short-term panic. It has a half-life of just 8 days, but it's highly volatile and attacks the thyroid, particularly in children who drink contaminated milk. Contrast that with cesium-137, which has a half-life of over 30 years. This isotope sank right into the soil, creating decades-long agricultural restrictions, not just locally in Ukraine and Belarus, but as far away as sheep farms in the United Kingdom. And this brilliantly illustrates the immediate local cost. This is Pripyat. It was a once thriving atom town of 50,000 people located just a couple of miles from the plant. Around 36 hours after the explosion, a massive fleet of buses finally arrived, and the entire city was evacuated. Residents were told to pack enough for 3 days. They left everything behind, forced to leave their beloved pets roaming the streets, completely unaware they would never, ever return. The iconic yellow Ferris wheel in the local amusement park was abandoned just days before its scheduled grand opening. Ultimately, a 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established, resulting in the permanent relocation of roughly 115,000 people from the immediate area, severing them from their homes forever. 4. Nature's radioactive rebound. But history has a way of surprising us. In the total absence of human habitation, the desolate wasteland of the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone began to undergo a transformation that scientists are literally still struggling to fully comprehend today. The contrast here is truly mind-blowing. Back in 1986, the immediate environmental devastation was apocalyptic. 4 square kilometers of pine forest absorbed so much radiation that the trees turned a reddish-brown and died instantly, becoming the infamous red forest. Domestic animals in the direct path perished from massive radiation doses of 150 to 200 sieverts. Yet, look at the modern resurgence. Without human competition, agriculture, or industry, this highly radioactive landscape has somehow become one of Europe's most unlikely wildlife sanctuaries. Camera traps reveal thriving populations of gray wolves, Eurasian lynx, and even the endangered Przewalski's horse. But here's the craziest part. Scientists have discovered radiotrophic black fungi inside the reactor itself. These remarkable organisms use melanin, the exact same pigment found in human skin, to actually convert gamma radiation into chemical energy, much like plants use chlorophyll for photosynthesis. Nature is literally eating the radiation. 5. Containing the zone today. While nature adapts, human engineering has to remain vigilant. The original concrete sarcophagus that was hastily built over the smoldering reactor in 1986, it was only designed to last 20 to 30 years. It was structurally unstable, risking a massive collapse. To solve this terrifying problem, the international community banded together to construct an absolute marvel of modern engineering, the new safe confinement. Costing nearly $2 billion, this colossal metal arch is massive. It's actually tall enough to completely enclose the Statue of Liberty. Because building it directly over the open radioactive core would have been fatal to the construction workers, it was built adjacent to the reactor on Teflon-coated rails. Then, in 2016, it was painstakingly pushed over the old sarcophagus by hydraulic jacks. Its purpose isn't to be an airtight seal, but rather to use a specialized ventilation system to trap radioactive dust if the old sarcophagus collapses, safely containing the highly radioactive mass of melted core inside, known as the elephant's foot, while dismantling slowly occurs over the next century. Now, surprisingly, the completion of this arch drastically reduced ambient radiation in the surrounding areas, which actually created a boom in dark tourism prior to recent global events. To put this into perspective, let's look at the numbers. A person receives about 8 microsieverts a day, just from natural background radiation on Earth. If you took a one-day guided tour of the safe routes in Chernobyl, you'd receive about 3 to 5 microsieverts. Compare that to a transatlantic flight where cosmic radiation gives you a dose of roughly 300 microsieverts. So historically speaking, a tourist was subjected to far less radiation walking through the streets of Pripyat than they were on the actual plane ride over. However, the zone is absolutely not without its severe, ongoing risks. Deep inside the ruins, beneath that new safe confinement arch, the nuclear fuel is still reacting. Between 2017 and late 2020, sensors recorded a terrifying doubling in neutron density in some sub-reactor spaces, indicating increased fission activity before it finally leveled off. Furthermore, external events have brought new, profound dangers. In early 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine resulted in active fighting within the Chernobyl area, disrupting crucial site operations and causing physical damage to the confinement walls. As a result of these compounding physical and geopolitical risks, the entire exclusion zone remains strictly closed to all visitors as of April 2026. The legacy of Chernobyl is clearly not locked in the past. It is a very active, constantly evolving challenge. The original radioactive material inside that reactor will remain dangerously potent for tens of thousands of years. We have built an incredible engineering marvel designed to buy us a century of safety. But with fission reactions spontaneously shifting deep inside the rubble and external human conflicts threatening the stability of the site, we really have to ask ourselves, as internal reactions shift and external wars threaten stability, can a 100-year shield truly contain a 30,000-year disaster? Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.